Welcome to Farm Charm Chic. I'm Emily. In today's episode, I am sharing with you 8 thrift flips that you have to try for summer. They are beautiful and you are going to love each and every one of them. On this channel, we love making DIYs, crafting, dupes, hacks, and thrift flipping. If that's something that you enjoy, please consider subscribing. Remember to leave a thumbs up if you like any of today's projects. But let's go make some DIYs. Rolling pins are super easy to find at thrift stores, antique stores, in this case, vintage market days. In fact, I saw so many of them in different booths at vintage market days. I started taking a little bit of footage just to show you. It was almost comical that like almost every booth had some type of rolling pins. Now, whether you have some vintage ones or newer ones, you want to showcase them maybe in a collection, maybe you just have one that you want to showcase. I have a really fun idea for you that you can do with vintage rolling pins that's not going to compromise the integrity of your rolling pin. You don't have to use paint, but you can even change it up for different seasons and do it however you want. I really love this idea and I hope that you guys like this too because it is super fun. Now, this is some fabric I picked up at Dollar Tree. I thought it was very perfect for a kitchen DIY. Kind of has like the farmer's market, the butcher. I just really thought it was perfect for this project. So I'm just putting a little slit in one edge of the fabric and I'm going to tear this down. It tears pretty easily here. And the point of this is to have a really frayed edge. So I'm going to even kind of pull some extra little strings out and make sure that's a really like ratty-tatty frayed edge there. And that really gives that nice farmhouse aged look. And then I just kind of lay it up against my rolling pin and you just decide how much of your rolling pin you want to have showing and how much fabric you want on there. I just kind of eyeballed that and I just put a little slit in and I'm going to tear this piece off and do the same thing with it, pulling away all of the extra threads and everything to give it a really frayed edge look. I love to have my mini heat press heated up when I'm working with fabric or ribbon because it is so nice to be able to use this as an iron and get all of the wrinkles out. It really is a great tool to have. Now we need to make one more cut to our fabric here. So I'm just rolling the fabric around the rolling pin here and I'm going to cut, leaving about an inch to overlap. And then the same process. I just tear this fabric and then I fray all of the edges. I'm going to use my Elmer's Purple School glue stick for this. It is non-toxic, so it is not going to harm your rolling pin in any way, either in residue or by adding harmful chemicals or anything into there. So I just placed that on my fabric. Now you could completely skip this step and just fold the fabric over on itself and not glue anything directly to the rolling pin. And I'm just going to take my heat press and iron this edge flat so it will lay flat on the rolling pin. And then I put my glue directly on the fabric here on this edge of the fabric. So that way when I fold it over, then I've got a nice edge that's sealed onto my rolling pin. Putting this edge down and you're pulling it kind of taut, you just want to pay attention to the line of the fabric and make sure that it stays as straight as possible so it doesn't look all ski-wampus or anything. And I do take my heat press and I go over this edge. This helps if there's any wrinkles or any creases or anything that happen. It smooths those out really well. Now you could leave your rolling pin like this, but this is the fun part for me, is embellishing it. I love how mine turns out. Yours may look completely different than this, so hopefully this just helps give you some fun ideas. I just take some of the thicker Walmart twine and I wrap that around 3 or 4 times and then tie it off in a knot. And I took a little sprig of the Walmart boxwood, as well as this little piece of lavender that came from this year's Dollar Tree spring bundle. And I just placed those under the knot there. And then to get them to stay, I take my hot glue and you're just going to place the littlest amount of hot glue, just enough to keep those in place. This is going onto the fabric. It's not going to harm the rolling pin in any way. I had made this little beaded chain and I thought, oh, do I want to put it on here? This is me trying to hold it up to decide if I decide to put it on or not. It really went back and forth on this. I do end up adding it and I really do like how it looks, but it took me a minute to kind of imagine what it looked like. But I just essentially tie this around the knot so it's on there. I take some smaller twine and I just wrap that around my finger, maybe 10 times or so to make a little finger bow. I'll just take another piece of twine and wrap that around the middle to make a little bow here and just tie that off. And just those loops are going to make a cute bow to put on here. I know bows aren't everybody's thing. I think it looks really cute on here. It needed something extra. And in my mind, this was the perfect thing. So if you had a different idea, it would be fun to know what else you guys would try. So just a little bit of hot glue. I let that dry for a little bit before I place it down so the glue doesn't squirt out everywhere. And then I just kind of move my tassels or the tails of the bow there. I trim them up a little bit so they're not so crazy. And then here it is. Now, the fun thing about this is if you were to hang this, because it's got a hole in the handle and kind of switch the direction of your bow, then those beads hang really cute if you were to display that like off of a hanging rod or something. I'll show you what that looks like, but I think this looks really cute. I think the florals on the one side and the beads on the other really do kind of balance each other out. Here's a look at what it looks like hanging. What a fun way to display this if you have a hook or a shelf somewhere that you could hang things from. And imagine if you were to do this for some different seasons. It would be really easy to change this out because we're not compromising that rolling pin in any way. But imagine like a Christmas rolling pin or fall or something. I just think what a fun way to bring an actual kitchen item in and use it as decor, especially if you have some vintage ones or a collection. Kind of a fun, unique way to display these. What do you guys think of this one?
This is a thrift flip that I'm going to try here. I got this finial at my local thrift store. It says I paid $1.50 for it here. I love this piece and the black color really is great, but I wanted it to be a really white chippy look. So I'm trying a new technique. If you guys have watched my distressing, you'll know that I've never actually done like the wax candle technique, and I've had a few of you tell me to try it out, how good it works. And so I thought this would be the perfect project because I really wanted this to have kind of a chippy look to it. So I'm going around all of the raised areas on this finial. Now you can buy finials at Home Depot, Lowe's, like in their like where the banisters and things are. I feel like you can find these a lot of times at your craft stores, home decor stores, wherever. I found mine at a thrift store. So if you find any of them, I think this is a perfect project, and they can be any shape or any size. So after I got all of the wax on all of the edges and all of the pieces, I went around with just some white chalk paint. You can do whatever color. I thought that the chippy white would be really good, especially since for this project, I'm wanting to bring in that red, white, and blue look. So I'm just going through, I give this 2 or 3 coats, I think closer to 3 coats to get the coverage that I want of that white paint. And you can see here just going all over the entire finial. I do really light coats here. I was nervous as I was doing this that it was going to rub off at this point on the wax. It totally did not. It was totally fine. This is definitely a technique I think I'll try in the future though, because I really liked how it turned out. So you can see how the coverage ends up being on this finial, how you can't really see that black at all. Now there were 2 ways that I did this. The first one, I grabbed a baby wipe. I think a wet towel might have done a little bit of a better job than the baby wipe did, but I'm just wiping off around the edges where I knew that wax was, and it just wipes off. You have to use a little bit of elbow grease, but it does go around each of the edges there to wipe off that wax, or it was like a barrier so the paint doesn't stick there. And then after I kind of got to this part and thought, that's a little bit hard, I do end up getting out my putty knife, and it does scrape off really well where the wax was. So keep that in mind here, and I'll show you that here in just a second after I use this. But if I'm to do this again, I really do think that I will just get a wet towel rather than the baby wipe, because I think it would cause a little bit more friction. So here you can see me using that putty knife. So I just kind of went over all of the areas, and then I would wipe it down with the baby wipe, because you do get a little bit of the scratch marks on there from that putty knife. But I think this is looking really good, and I just love how you can see all of that detail start to show out in it, and you can see all of that little chippiness there. I did drill a hole in the top of it so I could place my flag in there, so you could change that out for different seasons or different flags or countries you're wanting to represent. But I think this turned out absolutely beautiful and perfect for summertime to have on a porch or a mantle or somewhere in your home.
My oldest picked out this beautiful vase at the thrift store for me to flip. I'm just noticing my son's face there too. He is such a crack up. Anyhow, I forgot to hit record when I started painting this, so I wanted to show you kind of what this vase looked like before, and then we'll kind of move on to the next step. Because of the technique I'm doing with this, I wanted to lighten this up. So whether you use chalk paint, acrylic paint, spray paint, you just want to start with a nice white base. So I just used some chalk paint. I didn't go all the way down into the vase because it'll have flowers and stuff in it, but I did that top area where you'd be able to see around that. Now I picked up these beautiful blue and white napkins at Home Goods, and I thought it would be so fun to give this that like pottery that you see that has the beautiful blue and white detailing on the paint. I know it has a specific name, it escapes me right now, but I love it. I think it's beautiful, and that's kind of what I was going for here. So you can see with the napkins here, they'll have a couple of layers, so you just lick your fingers, press down in the corners, and they're going to separate rather easily, and I'm just going to peel this off. Now, it's always a good idea after you get this first layer off to check and see if there is a second layer by doing the same thing. A lot of times if you don't realize there's a second layer and you're going to Mod Podge, you'll realize really soon just because you'll start to see them start to come apart. It kind of is a little bit messy. So just always check to see if there's multiple layers after that first layer you've peeled off. Now I just placed some Mod Podge down. I'm working in sections on this vase. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough at the top to go up and cover up to that lip. I wanted to leave the inside of the lip of the vase white, so it looks like just the outside was the printed portion. A lot of the ones that I've seen, that's kind of the way that they looked, so that's kind of what I'm trying to mimic here. Now this brush I have right here is dry. I'm using it to push it down because there was a lot of little like crevices in this vase, kind of like a detailing. So I'm using that brush to help make sure that the napkin will go down into all of those spaces, and I'm not going to rip it with my finger or anything. I just thought the dry bristles on this brush kind of helped press it where it needed to and help smooth it out. So that's just kind of a tip for you there when you're doing projects like this, to use those brushes because it really does help get that thin napkin pushed where it needs to go. Now it's kind of hard working around the lip of this because you've got an odd shape, so it's not going to be like completely all in one straight line. So there's just, the different curves of the piece that I'm working with. So you can kind of see I'm able to kind of peel back that napkin a little bit. Just be very careful when you're doing that. Make sure your Mod Podge hasn't completely dried or it will rip your napkin. But I'm just kind of pushing it down in all of the areas that I need to. I'm kind of pulling it, just manipulating it to get it covered completely and get it as smooth as I can. Now there was just that little area that was left where my napkin didn't fit. So I'm just going to Mod Podge in that area that's painted, and then I just place my napkin down, and then I'll just go and tear where I want my edge to be so it will kind of blend in together. When you're tearing it, it leaves kind of that natural fibrous edge to it, and it will help it blend into the napkin. I had originally thought, okay, this will just be the back of the vase because, you'll be able to see a line. You honestly cannot tell where the line stops or starts. So it ends up being that you have to get pretty close to look to find that edge to know which is the back. So just kind of trust the process and go with it. And you're going to kind of fold the napkin over itself when you're working around this thinner edge at the top. And that's totally okay. When you go over it with your final coat of Mod Podge, it all looks nice and smooth and together. To make sure I have a nice clean edge on the bottom, I'm just using my fingernail file and I'm going over this. I'm sanding towards the bottom of the vase here. You can kind of see just an emotion that's not going to peel back your napkin, but this is just going to gently sand it off so you have a nice clean edge. And that's kind of what I do, or not kind of, that's exactly what I do around the base of this. When I did that, I did notice that there was a couple of areas on the base that weren't glued down as much as I wanted with the Mod Podge. So I just take my brush and I'm just kind of going over the top of it first to see, and I do end up having to put a little bit more Mod Podge on my brush and kind of slip it underneath that napkin just to give it a little bit more juice, if you will, to kind of help that adhere to the surface. And that way I'm not going to have a problem where this is lifting up or anything. and has completely dried and all that Mod Podge is dry, you're going to go back in and put another layer of Mod Podge. Now, if you wanted this to be kind of shiny, you could put a glossy Mod Podge on there. You could spray it with a clear protectant, but you definitely want to protect this with something. But you guys, look at how beautiful this piece looks. I love this. I mean, this is what you're paying like buku bucks for in the stores, these high-end pieces with that beautiful blue and white detailing. I just think this turns out so pretty. I have blue and white in my home, so I'm excited to use this in there. But I mean, this literally was just like under a couple of dollars to create. I mean, how amazing is that? What do you guys think of this one? I really loved this tin sign when I saw it, and it was the right price at $2, and it had this beautiful texture all around the edge of it, and so I thought I can really work with this. So I'm just going to use my heat tool to remove all of the stickers from the back here and give a nice clean surface to work on. And I'm spraying it down to get it all clean, all that dust and grime wiped away here, and starting with a nice clean slate that we want to do. My original intent with this sign was to paint it all completely white and then use some different colors to kind of make that texture on the edges pop. However, when I got to this point and kind of started seeing how the dry brushing looked on that tin, I was like, ooh, I really want to have that be what it looks like. So I'm just going to wipe the paint back and start completely over. As I'm wiping the paint, it's drying. So I'm just going to spray a little bit of my mister on there, and that's just going to help dampen the paint. So it's easy for me to wipe off. So just a wet paper towel or a wet wipe is going to help get that paint off of there. And then to protect that tin so I don't spill over with any of the paint, I'm just putting some painter's tape to give some nice crisp, clean edges. And it takes about 2 to 3 coats of chalk paint to cover that middle design there. And because I don't want to see that at all, I want to kind of have this be its own sign and not see any of that. I mean, the sign was beautiful the way it was, but it's just not what I'm going for. So now I put a little antiquing wax on a paper towel here, or just a towelette or something, and I want to age this color of paint here. I want it to look like it's been around for a very long time. So I'm just kind of smearing some antiquing wax on this. You create a lot of texture when you're using the chalk paint with brush strokes or whatnot. And so this is what's fun about using chalk paint, is it can go to all of that antiquing wax can go into all of the different texture that you created. So it really is fun to play around with different types of waxes to see the different types of finishes you get on different colors. So I'm just rubbing this all around here and kind of going back and forth to dip it in some more wax on here. Now I don't leave it this heavy, so I'll show you how I rectify that, because it does look pretty heavy at this point. So I'm spraying my mister on here, and this is just going to add a little bit of water on there, and I will come in and just kind of wipe it back. And this is going to take away some of the top layer that hasn't fallen down into all of the texture. And so that way you still get the antiqued wax look, but it's not as dark, it's not as heavy. I'm using that same towel that I used to put the antiquing wax on. I'm using it kind of like a stamp to add a little bit of extra texture, a little bit of extra aging, distressing on there. Completely optional, but I do like the way that it turns out. Now I have these stencils from Essential Stencils. There's a couple of them in this package here that say, you know, like market or antiques. And I ultimately decided on one that says vintage, just because I love this antique one, but I didn't love all of the detail on it. So I just kind of thought this one that said vintage was perfect. So I'm just using my ruler to kind of make sure that I get it as centered as I can here. And then I just place a little bit of painter's tape on the sides to hold that into place. Now I'm going to use some elephant chalk paint with a stencil brush. These stencil brushes also came from Essential Stencils, so if you do happen to get some stencils from them, pick up their brushes, because they are so much better than the cheap Dollar Tree brushes, and they're not super expensive either, and they last, if you take care of them, they're going to last a very long time. But I'm just using a up and down pouncing motion as well as a swirling motion, and I let the first layer dry, and I actually go back in a second time because I wanted that vintage to really, the words to really pop, or the letters to really pop on there. So that's why I decided to go over it twice to give a nice thick coat to it. It's always fun to peel back your stencil and reveal your design. I just think this turns out so beautiful. Their stencils are amazing, so I highly recommend checking them out if you like to do stenciling or rub-on transfers at all. So now I'm just going to go over the letters here with just a little bit of paint. This is just the paint that was left over in my brush from painting the sign, to go over the letters to kind of make them look not so crisp and clear. It just adds a little bit of weathering to them, I would say, maybe even more than distressing. And then I'm going to just peel back all of this painter's tape to reveal the edge of my sign. To help this beautiful texture shine through on the edge of this is just a little bit of paint. All I've done is just dip it in a little bit of white paint, brushed most of it off, and then I'm just coming over all of the edges here, you can see, and just hitting all of it, just hits all those high points of that texture and that detail to help that pop. And I really, really love how this turns out. This has got such a beautiful design on that edge, and where it was left the color that it was, like you couldn't really even see all of that detail. So I just am taking my towel and a little bit of antiquing wax. All this is doing is it's just aging the paint that's on there a little bit, and it's brushing back some to kind of help that natural brown color kind of reveal itself as well. I think this turns out so beautiful. I can just imagine this in some cute little old time shop or something, or just something that a little storefront might have, saying that they have vintage items. This would even be really so beautiful in a little powder room or something. I love this. Where would you guys put this in your house? I just think this turns out so beautiful, and I love that my vision kind of changed as I went along with it. Instead of painting the entire sign, I had that idea to showcase that edge, and I think I'm so grateful that I made that choice because that edge looks so beautiful. I feel like cutting boards are one of those items that you can find really at any thrift store or secondhand shop, flea market. In this case, I found this at Vintage Market Days, and there was a lot of them everywhere. And also cutting boards, even if you don't find one thrifted, or you might have one at home that you could just use to do this with. But a lot of times you're not going to pick up one of these cutting boards and use it for food because you don't know the history or where it's been, and you can see all of those like cut marks in it. Like, you just don't want to trust that. So you just want to wipe it down with like a Clorox wipe or Lysol wipe really good. But the technique I'm going to show you here is going to keep it so you don't have to paint a cutting board, but you can use it as like a decorative statement piece, just something kind of to jazz one up here. And I'm doing mine kind of in a 4th of July theme just because it's close to the 4th of July for me. But just know that this technique, you can do it for any season, any type of kitchen style that you want. The technique is the same, so just keep that in mind as we go here. So I'm just taking a piece of fabric and I'm just ripping it on the edges so I have a natural edge. You could even use just like a ribbon for this part, or even like scrapbook paper would work if you wanted to do that too. But you could use hot glue to do this if you would like to, but I love to use this Elmer's school glue here. This stuff is the best, and specifically this brand, I have not had any trouble with this not holding something. And I like it because it's non-toxic, so I can put it straight on my cutting board, just a little bit right there. And even if it was a cutting board that you have that maybe you're going to go back to using or something, if you were to wash that off, it's not going to leave any toxins or anything in your wood, so it's going to keep it nice and safe to use if you decide to do that. Now, I have this piece of ribbon here. This came from Joann's, but you can see it's a lot wider than the fabric I put down. So in order to cut that down to size, because I feel like with this pattern that's on there, I can do that and it's not going to look weird or anything. So I just folded it over on itself several times, and then I just cut up the middle with my scissors, and that's just going to make it a little bit of a thinner piece of ribbon. Now, of course, I could probably find a thinner piece of ribbon. I just happen to have this in my stash, and I really liked the way that it looked on here. I thought it was kind of fun with the stars and stripes on there, and I thought these layered really really well. But as you can see how much fun you would have doing something like this, if you did this for like fall time or Christmas, you really could have a lot of creativity that you could use to come up with different ideas. Now, since I'd glued the original piece of fabric to the cutting board with my school glue, I was okay using hot glue on here. I didn't feel like that was going to peel off or anything. And I just took a strip of each of the ribbon and the fabric to tie around the top here. That's just kind of going to bring a little bit of visual interest up towards the handle there, which I think is kind of fun. And hopefully this just gets those creative juices flowing for you. And you know that you don't have to copy it exactly. I mean, that's fine if you do, but you might be able to find something that works a little bit better for you, or you like something that I do or you don't like. That's up to you. Now, I love to use cookie cutters a lot of times on these little cutting boards when I do this. However, I didn't have any 4th of July like looking cookie cutters, but I have these little tart tins that I picked up at Vintage Market Days, and I just thought they almost looked kind of like fireworks in my mind. In my mind, it works. So, maybe kind of like little stars or something, but I'm just using my Crop-A-Dial, which is a wonderful tool. I can link it down in my description box, but it is so fantastic to be able to cut through little thin pieces of metal like this, or even like the Dollar Tree signs if you want to make like a new hole or something in them. This Crop-A-Dial makes quick work of that, and it's very easy to use. Now, to tie these on, I'm just using some twine. I just tied that around the handle of the cutting board. I fed it through each of the little tart tins there and tied that on. I wanted to make sure that they kind of hit at a little bit of a different length, so you can kind of see the one hangs lower than the other one there. And then I even, I was thinking about putting a little bit of greenery in there, so I tested that there. This cutting board did not have like a tie for the handle here, like if you were to hang this. So I just took some thicker twine and fed that through just to kind of give it a handle. Whether you hang it from this or not, I think it kind of completes it where there is a hole there for something like this. I thought that was kind of nice to be able to put that on there. So you could put some greenery like I had on there if you would like to. I just liked leaving it like this. This is such a fun process to be able to kind of dress up a piece. Maybe you have a china hutch, or you stack some cutting boards against your backsplash in your kitchen. How fun would a little one of these be stacked against those to kind of bring in this a seasonal touch or a holiday touch, or even just like match your kitchen? I love this technique. What do you guys think of this? All right, I used the flowers from this pot in a earlier thrift flip, so I'm using the pot now, and it has this horrid styrofoam in it. It is that kind that breaks apart, and it's very staticky, sticks to everything, lots of little styrofoam balls everywhere. And I want to show you that as I was pulling this out, I noticed it had like some wires in there. So whenever you're doing anything like this, just be very careful. You never know what you're going to find, and you definitely don't want to cut yourself on anything. You can see off to the left, there was actually 2 of those in there. Now this styrofoam went to the very bottom of this pot. I just didn't want it around my home. I wanted to contain it, get rid of it, and let's move on from it because I hate this stuff so bad. So I just scraped down the edges here just to get everything removed from the pot. And you can kind of see it's just stuck to my hands everywhere. Now, in case you didn't know, if you are to mist this with like a little mister bottle, you can put your hands like over the trash and spray your hands down. It reduces the static electricity, and it makes it much easier to kind of work with when you're cleaning it up. So keep that in mind. Now you can kind of see here that I'm painting this white, but you can see the difference between the tone. That original tone is kind of a yellowish greenish undertones to it. I don't love the color, but I really just want to try a different technique. So on the second coat of paint, I go up and down with a sponge tool. I just want to reduce the brush mark so it has kind of an organic, natural look. Now I went out to my flower bed and I grabbed some dirt and I sprayed it with my mister bottle to kind of get the consistency of mud. And I'm going to rub this all over the pot. I've seen this on Pinterest, techniques where people do this to kind of get that earthy, dirty look to like the plaster pots like this. So I wanted to give it a try. And this is the perfect project since it's a thrift flip. If it goes wrong, then I can just toss it and move on. But I really just thought it would be fun. So I'm just rubbing this all over, just smearing it, rubbing it in so it gets into all of the little nooks and crannies of that plaster. And I even go all over the inside of the pot as well, just making sure that everywhere is covered and that was pressed in really good. I even took my Cricut scraping tool. You could use just like a leftover gift card or something to do this. You could probably even skip this step, the mud was just so caked on here that I wanted to scrape the majority of it off, and I thought this would push it into all of those little crevices a little bit better as well. So I'm spraying it down with my mister bottle here to kind of get the excess off. I just want to wipe this down now and clean this off. Now I go through this whole process and I realize there is an easier way, but I wanted to leave this in here because if you can't get outside to use like your garden hose and you're doing this like on a table or your sink and you don't want a bunch of mud going down your sink, obviously, I just left this in to show you that you can do this with a mister or a squirt bottle, and it works just fine. You can get all of that excess dirt off of there. So this is when I realized that I'm like, I've got to spray this out. So I take it outside and I sprayed it. I sprayed the entire pot down and it left a good amount of the dirt on there. All of those little crevices kept that dirt. So to get it a little bit more, because it did kind of get it a little bit more clean than I wanted, I'm just taking one of the dirty rags that I have here and just kind of in a stamping motion, like a texture stamp, I'm just going up and down to add a little bit more of that dirt to it. Obviously, if you're doing this process, you like the look of dirt, so you probably would want to do this to kind of keep that real organic look. But I go around the lip of the pot, inside of the pot, everywhere. I wanted this to look like, since it's this plaster, like maybe had just been found out in like a French country barn somewhere that would used back when somebody was growing their seeds or something like that. Just a real organic look to it. And once all of that's dry, the dirt and the mud and everything, I go over it with some Mod Podge. This is just going to seal everything. So if you leave it outside, which if you do leave it outside, use a waterproof Mod Podge, because if the rain and everything gets on it, you don't want Mod Podge running all over, but you want to protect that aged look that we just gave it. But look at how beautiful this looks. I mean, I think this turned out perfect. And this is something that you really could use and style all year long. I mean, imagine at Christmas time with a really pretty evergreen in there. I just think this turned out so beautiful, and it's a great staple piece. And I mean, I think I paid $3. I used for this at the thrift store. I used the flowers in another project, and then with some paint and some mud. I think it looks great. I was very excited. This technique was a lot of fun, a little bit dirty. It took me a few minutes to realize I probably needed gloves on, so start with the gloves. But really, all in all, I just think this turned out beautiful, and I'm very excited to use this. And if you have access to a lot of these pots, I think this would be a great piece to make and sell, because this is the look that a lot of people are going for. I was so excited when I saw this piece in the thrift store. It was missing one of its little like hanging knobs there. It was $1.50, I believe, is what I paid on this piece. And it, you know, clearly it's meant to be hung on the wall for you to hang something from, like your aprons or something. I don't know, whatever you use, some cute little decor or something. But it was missing a couple of one of the little knobs on it. So I'm just going to remove the others, and I'm going to turn this into a riser. You guys know I love my risers. They're so fun. They're such a great way to bring some different textures into your decorating, and I feel like they're pieces that can be used over and over again. I recently did a bridal shower for my niece, and I took all of my risers, and we had the most beautiful display of food for the table on all these different heights and different things. It was so pretty. So they really do come in handy, and I just love having a lot of them. So it takes just a minute for me to get all of the hardware removed from this. I even removed the pieces where you would hang this, because we don't need them there anymore. And I'm going to end up spray painting this so I can get into all those little grooves. Hand painting this, I think, would be kind of a nightmare, so I didn't want to even go down that road. I'm just taking a little spackling. My spackling is kind of dry. I think I need to get a new tub of it because it was a little bit, but it worked, but it's definitely on its last leg here. But I'm just kind of pushing that down through that opening where the knobs were screwed in. And then I will just let this dry, and then I will go back in and sand it so it's flat. And that's just going to camouflage that hole that was in there from where those little hanging fixtures were. To turn this into a riser, I'm using some little teeny finials. I purchased these on Amazon. I will leave a link to them in my description box. But if you want to make it really easy on yourself, even just some little wood beads, if you have some even from Dollar Tree or something, would work perfect for this. So we're going to paint over them so it could even be like the colored beads from Dollar Tree. But I do love these little finials. I buy them in a pack of like 25 or 50 of them. So I have quite a few, and they just kind of have a little bit of a different shape than a wooden wooden bead, and so it kind of adds just a little bit more embellishment on it than just a plain wooden bead. But again, nobody's going to be turning this over and looking at the back side of it, so you're probably fine to just do what you have. I love this coastal sage color. This is such a beautiful color of spray paint. I couldn't leave this natural because we had to remove that hardware, and so I had to fix with the spackling. So I did need to choose a color, but I think this is going to match my decor so wonderfully, and I think this is a very kind of a neutral color almost in the decor styles that you're seeing today. But look at how pretty this is and how beautiful. I really think this is going to be such a fun riser to have with all of those cutouts and everything. And you can go as simple as you want or as elaborate as you want, even to put like a couple candles on here or have this in your bathroom with some beautiful perfume bottles or something. I just think this is so pretty.
A few videos back, I did a darling little tin that was very much like this that I rescued from my mother-in-law's house. It was on its way to the thrift store. And I also have this little watering can tin that is the same pattern that is on it, or very similar. But I did learn with that bucket that this is paper that is on here. You can see how that kind of comes up. And it was a huge pain for me to remove from that bucket. So I'm trying to use the lessons I learned from that with this. So I sanded all over to kind of take the glossiness off of this paper. I then took it to my kitchen sink and had it soak for about 20 minutes just in warm water, and it wiped completely clean. All of that paper, I could just use my finger to wipe it off. I'm sorry I don't have any footage of that, but it was very easy to do that. And then I just wiped it down with a towel to make sure this is really clear. Now I am just using some white paint. I end up doing the entire thing in one coat, and then you can kind of see where my surface line is there. That's where my blue paint's going to go on the top of my watering can. And I'm just using some painter's tape to get that line on there so I have that area to do my little blue star section for a flag, because I want to do this in a flag pattern. Now I feel like if you don't have a watering can at home, they're pretty easy to find at just your gardening store or vintage markets, thrift stores, things like that. But if you don't have a watering can, this would be darling just using one of those tin Dollar Tree buckets that they have. The taller ones I think would be so cute to do that with too. So I'm just using a couple strips of the 1-inch painter's tape to do my stripes. So if you have 2-inch painter's tape, that would be much easier, but this was the only tape I had on hand. So I just go all the way around and I'm just painting or get that spaced, I know words here. I get it spaced all the way around the watering can, and I'm just doing my white paint in there and just careful not to get it over that blue. I should have placed tape up there. It ended up being fine, but that would have made things a lot easier. But I just went through each of these stripes, making sure that they each had a good coverage. 2 coats minimum of the red, 3 coats to make it as a little bit darker if you want. And I was just really careful over those the painter's tape there to make sure that when I lifted that up, I would get really crisp and really clear lines. So you can see here I'm taking off that paint and how crisp those lines are. If you do have any bleed through, just take white, a little bit of white on your paintbrush and go over the little areas that might bleed through. I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, you should paint your base color first and then your top color. If you have the time to do that, go ahead and try that. I've never had it be it just takes a lot of extra time, and I get that sometimes you want it to be perfect, but I feel like the amount of bleed through I have doing it just this way saves me so much time. It's very rare that I do ever. I had one little spot here, so all I had to do was just kind of go over it like that, and then voila, it was fixed. So I do know the method of painting the base color first. It takes a lot of extra time, and sometimes when you're trying to get videos out, you just go with it, and I honestly don't have too much of a problem with it. Now, if you have some star stencils, use that. I did not have any, so I just cut some out on my cutting machine, just some vinyl that I used as a stencil here. I know at Dollar Tree you can get stencils that have stars on them. You can use star stickers. You can freehand them. So many different ways to get stars onto your item here. Trace some that you might have. You could even glue some on there as a little bit of an extra embellishment. But I just did the white paint on that. I did them above each of the red stripes there. I thought that was a good way to kind of space them. And you can see when I peel those back how good they look. Now, I did decide to rough this up a little bit. I think I might end up putting this on my porch. So I wanted it to look like it had been sitting out for a couple of years. It was kind of aged, something not as new. And so I thought that sanding it, I really liked how that looked. And this is a hard coat Mod Podge I painted on there to protect it. You guys, this is one of my favorite 4th of July projects I've ever done. I think it turned out so cute. I mean, you would pay big bucks for this, I feel like, at a craft show or something. And I think it's darling just to have a little plant in it. It is a functional watering can, so I can use it for that. It is protected with that Mod Podge, but I really think I'm just going to use it as a decor piece. Do you guys like this at all? Would you guys put this on your porch, or would you keep it in your house?
I would like to thank you so much for joining me for today's compilation video. I hope that you enjoyed all of these DIYs. If you had a favorite, let me know down in the comments. I always love to hear which ones you guys like the best. Thank you so much for watching today. I'll see you next time. Happy crafting! If you like the video that you just saw and you want to keep crafting together, here's another video that you might enjoy. And as always, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.